In a world flooded with unanswered questions, some thinkers come merely to provide answers. But there are a rare few who change the very shape of the questions themselves. Sadr al-Din Muhammad Shirazi, whom history remembers as Mulla Sadra, was one of those few. He didn't just challenge ideas, he challenged the structure of how we think. He didn't just shift conclusions, he redefined the starting point of thought itself. Sadra lived during a time when the Islamic world was paralyzed by dogma, when theological rigidity had dimmed the light of reason, and philosophy had been pushed into the shadows. But he had the courage to step into that darkness. He didn't isolate philosophy from faith. He brought it to life by blending the rationalism of Ibn Sina, the illuminationist wisdom of Suhrawardi, the mystical depth of Ibn Arabi, and the spiritual teachings of Shia Islam. He named this synthesis transcendent theosophy, Hikmat al-Muta'aliyah. But this wasn't just a philosophy, it was a bridge, a connection, a bold attempt to unite intellect and heart, logic and love, rational proof and spiritual vision. At a time when many theologians saw reason as a threat to faith, Mulla Sadra showed that a well-guided reason leads not away from faith, but directly into its heart. So why should we care about him 4 centuries later? Because the questions that haunted him still haunt us. Who are we? Where did we come from? Is there anything beyond the material world? Does the soul endure? Or is it just a flicker, soon to vanish? And the answers he offered weren't dry, cold abstractions. They were luminous, like light piercing through fog. When he said, existence is primary, not essence, he wasn't just offering a metaphysical tweak, he was saying something profound. We are not just what we are. We are what we can become. In this journey, we'll walk through the life, thought, and legacy of one of the most dazzling minds in Islamic philosophy. From the alleys of Shiraz to the silence of Kahak, from the intensity of his solitude to the intellectual mountains of his magnum opus, The Four Journeys. We'll follow a thinker who dared to ask not just, what is existence, but who are we within it? Sadr al-Din Muhammad ibn Ibrahim Qawami Shirazi, later known simply as Mulla Sadra, was born in the year 979 AH 1571 CE in Shiraz, Persia. He came from a noble and affluent family. His father, Khwaja Ibrahim, was a prominent political figure and a generous patron of religious scholars. That meant young Sadra grew up in an environment where knowledge wasn't just encouraged, it was woven into the walls of his home. He had access to rich libraries, meaningful conversations with scholars, and most importantly, freedom to question. In his youth, Sadra traveled to Isfahan, the intellectual heart of Iran at the time. Isfahan wasn't just a city, it was a living academy, a place where the best minds gathered. There he became a student of 2 giants, Mir Damad, a master of philosophy, famous for his concept of eternal time and for bridging Avicennian and illuminationist thought. Sheikh Bahai, a polymath fluent in jurisprudence, mathematics, geometry, and esoteric sciences. Mir Damad left a deep imprint on Sadra's soul. But Mulla Sadra wasn't just absorbing ideas, he was transforming them. He immersed himself not only in the works of the Greeks, Ibn Sina and Suhrawardi, but also in mystical texts, Quranic interpretation, and hadith. He studied theology and philosophy side by side, something few dared to do with equal seriousness. But with innovation comes resistance. Sadra's ideas were bold. He questioned established views on faith and reason, matter and spirit, life and resurrection. And such challenges didn't go unnoticed. Religious conservatives and literalist jurists grew increasingly hostile toward him. Eventually, Sadra was forced to leave Isfahan and retreat to the small village of Kahak near Qom. Now, you might think of this as a fall from grace, a philosopher cast into silence. But perhaps it was exactly the silence he needed. Because in Kahak, far from political tensions and academic rivalries, he wrote. He meditated, reflected, and began crafting the work that would define him for centuries to come. Al-Asfar al-Arba, the 4 spiritual journeys of the intellect. What began as exile became elevation. Years later, political tides changed. With the support of Alaverdi Khan and his son Imam Quli Khan, rulers of Shiraz, Sadra was invited to return to his hometown. He took up a teaching position at the Khan school, which still stands today in Shiraz, where he completed many of his major writings and trained a new generation of thinkers. In 1640 CE, 1050 AH, on a pilgrimage to Mecca, Mulla Sadra passed away. either in Basra or Najaf, according to different sources. His body was buried in Najaf, near the shrine of Imam Ali. He died in the physical sense. But his ideas, they didn't fade. They continued to shape thought, spark inquiry, and connect hearts to the cosmos. Not through dry academic lectures, but through a philosophy that invites the soul to awaken. Foundations of Transcendent Theosophy, a harmony of reason, revelation, and vision. If you had to capture Mulla Sadra's entire philosophy in one sentence, it might be this. He wanted to reunite the sky of reason with the soil of faith. What he created, Hikmat al-Muta'aliyah, or Transcendent Theosophy, was not just a philosophical system. It was a profound synthesis of thought, feeling, and faith. A spiritual architecture that brought together four major traditions: peripatetic philosophy, illuminationist philosophy, Islamic mysticism, and scriptural sources. To some, this combination might seem chaotic. How do you blend cold logic with mystical ecstasy? How do you let strict metaphysical reasoning dance with poetic visions of divine unity? But Mulla Sadra saw no contradiction, only layers of the same reality. The word Muta'ali doesn't just mean higher. It means beyond, overarching, lifting you above the limitations of each school by uniting their insights. Mulla Sadra believed that no single path, rational, mystical, or textual, could reveal truth on its own. Only their integration could bring depth. His philosophy wasn't against the Greeks or mystics or theologians. It was greater than their boundaries. And through this harmony, he created something new, not a battle between mind and soul, but a journey of the whole human being. To prove that philosophy and faith can walk together. To show that mystical experience and logical clarity are not enemies. To reinterpret religious truths in a language accessible to reason, and yet still true to revelation. The core pillars of his thought. In later sections, we'll explore these in depth. But here's a glimpse of what Sadra built his entire system upon. Primacy of existence, asalat al-wujud. Reality is not what things are, but that they are. Gradation of being, tashku wujud. All things exist, but not equally. Being comes in degrees. Substantial motion, haraka hariya. Change isn't just on the surface, it's in the core of existence itself. Unity of the knower and the known. To know something truly is to unite with it. Immateriality of the soul. The soul doesn't die, it evolves. Spiritual hermeneutics of Scripture. Religious texts must be understood not just in form, but in inner meaning. Each of these ideas deserves its own meditation, and we'll take our time to explore them all. But what matters now is this. Mulla Sadra didn't just want us to think, he wanted us to ascend. The primacy of existence, when being matters more than whatness. At the heart of Mulla Sadra's philosophy lies a simple but earth-shaking idea. Existence is real. Essence is secondary. Sounds obvious? Not quite. Before Sadra, most Islamic philosophers, like Avicenna, believed that essence, or quiddity, was the foundation of reality. They thought that what something is, its category, its definition, is the core. Existence, in their view, was like an accessory, something added on. But Sadra flipped the entire structure of thought. What is primacy, anyway? In philosophy, when we ask what is primary, we mean, what is real outside the mind? Is it essence, the thing's definition? Or is it existence, the simple fact that it is? Essence is the whatness of a thing, being a tree, being a horse, being human. Existence is the isness, the fact that it actually exists in the world, not just in concept. Sadra argued, essence is a concept, but existence is reality. Why does this matter? This wasn't just splitting hairs. This one idea reshaped Islamic metaphysics and opened new doors in spirituality, theology, and even psychology. Existence is one, but it comes in degrees. Everything from God to dust shares existence, but not equally. This leads to Sadra's next theory, the gradation of being. Our connection to God becomes understandable. If existence is a continuum, God is its highest intensity. We, as lower degrees of existence, are part of the same reality. We come from Him and return to Him, not metaphorically, but metaphysically. It provides a foundation for other key ideas. Without this principle, you can't fully explain substantial motion, the soul's journey, or mystical unity. They all rest on the idea that being is the ground of all things. It shifts our focus from appearance to essence. Essence is like a mask. What really matters is how deeply something exists, its ontological weight, not just its definition. Imagine two people. Both are humans in terms of essence, but one is shallow, unaware, spiritually dead. The other is wise, kind, luminous with presence. Same essence, but radically different degrees of being. This theory was not a side note. It was the beginning of a philosophical revolution. With the primacy of existence, Mulla Sadra cracked open the door to a dynamic, interconnected, spiritually alive universe. Is everything that exists equally real? Now that Mulla Sadra has shown us that existence is primary, he asks a profound follow-up question. If everything exists, why aren't all things the same? Why is God infinite, humans limited, and a rock? Well, a rock? His answer? Because existence isn't flat, it comes in degrees. This is what he called tashkik al-wujud, the gradation of being. What does gradation mean in philosophy? In simple terms, it means that something can be the same in essence but vary in intensity. Imagine a single beam of light. At one end it's blinding, at the other faint and dim. Still the same light, just different in strength. For Sadra, existence is just like that light. All things, God, angels, humans, animals, stones, are made from the same ontological stuff, existence. But their portion of existence differs. God equals pure, unlimited existence. Intellects like angels have strong, immaterial existence. Humans have intermediate existence. Animals and plants have lower levels. Inanimate matter has the weakest form of being. So when Sadra says everything exists, he doesn't mean they're equal. He means they are rays of the same sun, shining in different degrees. Sadra didn't invent this idea out of nowhere. He drew deeply from scripture, like this verse, Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. To him, this meant that all existence flows from divine light. The closer you are to the source, the brighter and more real you are. Unity and diversity. Things aren't separate by type, they're connected by degree. This dissolves many false binaries between body and spirit, material and divine. A dynamic spiritual map. If existence is a spectrum, then the soul can rise through its levels. Spiritual growth isn't a fantasy, it's a metaphysical reality. Mysticism grounded in logic. Sadra's theory laid the philosophical foundation for unity of being without falling into pantheism. God is not the creation, but the source from which all levels of being flow. A new way of seeing the world. Nothing is entirely dark. Everything has some share of light, some degree of existence. Some are just closer to the sun. Earlier philosophers struggled with the word existence. Some said it was just a shared word, a homonym, used differently for different things. Sadra said no, it's not just a word. Existence is one reality, flowing through everything, but showing up in stronger or weaker forms. The gradation of being is like a hidden architecture behind reality. It tells us, you don't have to become something else to grow. You just have to intensify your being. And now, with existence established as dynamic and gradated, Sadra takes another leap. What if even the substance of things, their very essence, is moving? Substantial motion. When existence itself is in motion. Before Mulla Sadra, most philosophers believed that change happens only on the surface, in the accidents of things. Color changes, size changes, location changes, but the substance, the core identity, stays still. Sadra once again said, he proposed one of the boldest ideas in all of Islamic philosophy. Substance itself is in motion. This is his theory of harakata johariya, substantial motion. A revolution in how we understand change, growth, time, and even the soul. What does it mean? In traditional philosophy, a tree grows taller, that's a change in quantity. Its leaves turn yellow, that's a change in quality. It sways in the wind, that's a change in place. But the treeness, its substance, was assumed to be fixed. Sadra shattered that assumption. He said, everything that exists is constantly becoming, not just in what it does, but in what it is. In other words, the very being of things flows. Imagine a fertilized egg, a nutfa. Over time, it becomes an embryo, then a fetus, a newborn, a child, a teen, and finally an adult. Is this just external growth? No. Sadra says its very substance is in motion, transforming at every stage. Each moment is a new being, tied to the last, but different from it. We are not static creatures. We are rivers, not statues. Human growth is existential, not just biological. We don't just live longer, we become more. Our soul grows in being. It redefines the concept of death and resurrection. Death isn't a break in being, it's a continuation, a shift, a higher mode in the same stream of substantial motion. It bridges psychology and metaphysics. Inner transformation, like spiritual awakening or deep learning, is not just mental. It's a real change in being. It makes time meaningful. Time isn't just a container for events, it's born from the very motion of being itself. Compared to earlier philosophers, Avicenna said, change occurs in the accidental properties. Sadra replied, what if the very core of the object is moving? It's like comparing a clock's hands moving over a fixed dial to the dial itself, rotating silently, endlessly. Sadra's universe is alive, not made of cold objects, but of realities in motion, flowing toward their perfection. With substantial motion, Mulla Sadra gave us a new view of reality. Everything is alive with movement. Existence itself pulses, grows, flows. Even the most silent stone is slowly becoming. Time is not separate from being, it is being in motion. And in this universe, the journey of the soul is not imaginary. It is written into the structure of existence itself. Now that we've seen how existence is flowing, let's look at what happens when we come to know something. The unity of the knower and the known, when knowing becomes becoming. We usually think of knowledge like this. There's me and there's something out there, a tree, a concept, a truth. I look at it, I understand it, end of story. But Mulla Sadra says that's just the surface. He believed that in the act of deep, real knowing, something much stranger and more beautiful happens. The knower and the known become one. This is the theory of Ittihad al-Aqil wal-Maqul, the unity of the intellect and the intelligible. What does it really mean? In classical philosophy, the mind is like a mirror. The object of knowledge is reflected in it. But Sadra said, that's not enough. A true knower doesn't just hold the idea, they merge with its reality. Let's say you grasp the meaning of justice, not just the definition, but its inner reality. At that moment, Sadra says, you don't just know justice, you are justice. Your being unites with the essence of what you know. Knowledge as transformation. This theory redefines knowledge. It's not a database in your head, a set of concepts, or a list of answers. It's ontological, a change in your very being. To know something truly is to become more real, to absorb a piece of the universe into your soul. Imagine someone who understands love, not just the psychology or the poetry, but someone who has lived it. They don't have love as an idea. They've become love, their actions, presence, and being radiate it. True knowledge isn't external, it's existential. Learning becomes sacred. To study truth is to transform yourself into it. The soul is shaped by what it knows. When you study beauty, goodness, or the divine, you're not memorizing, you're evolving. Education becomes a path of being. It's not about grades or jobs, it's about who you're becoming through what you learn. It bridges with mysticism. In Islamic mysticism, they say, the knower becomes annihilated in the known. Sadra shows this is not just mystical poetry, it's metaphysical fact. In Sadra's worldview, knowledge is not a tool, it is light. And when that light enters the soul becomes luminous. You don't learn justice, you shine with it. You don't understand God, you draw near to His presence. With this idea, Mulla Sadra brings the head and the heart together. He tells us knowledge isn't something you have, it's something you... Mulla Sadra wasn't just a philosopher, he was also a seeker, a wayfarer, a soul on a journey. He read the books, yes, he mastered logic, metaphysics, theology, but he also fasted, prayed, wept, and meditated in solitude. He believed that the highest truths cannot be proven, they must be tasted. This is where his philosophy turns inward, toward mystical experience. And without understanding this, you haven't truly understood him. Sadra believed in three sources of knowledge: reason, revelation, and unveiling. Reason refers to the analytical mind, revelation to divine scripture, and unveiling to inner vision and heart-based certainty. And he didn't just list these, he used them all. In fact, he once wrote, "Unless the heart is purified, the intellect cannot reach the heights of truth." His message? You can't philosophize your way to God with a polluted soul. One of Sadra's most powerful influences was Ibn Arabi, the great Andalusian mystic. Ibn Arabi taught that all of creation is a reflection of divine being, that every leaf, every atom, every soul is a mirror of God. Sadra embraced this vision, but translated it into philosophical language. He took the mystical idea of Wahdat al-Wujud, unity of being, and built a metaphysical system around it, one that could stand on both logic and light. God, the one real existence. In Sadra's mystical metaphysics, God is pure, limitless existence. Everything else is a lower manifestation of that existence. But nothing has reality independent of him. It's like the sun and its rays. The rays shine because of the sun, but they are not the sun itself. Creation is real, but only through him, in him, and from him. This is not pantheism. It's ontological humility. Everything is nothing without the divine presence that sustains it. Sadra believed that every soul is on a journey, a motion not just through time, but through being. This journey has three stages: ishq, love for truth, the spark, the yearning to know; fana, annihilation in God, letting go of ego, pride, false identity; baka, subsistence in God, returning to the world, but transformed, now living not from the self, but through the divine. Even in his most complex works, like the Four Journeys, Sadra's tone often becomes personal, poetic, even devotional. He weaves verses of the Quran, quotes from Hadith, and mystical insights into his logic. For him, reason is a map, heart is the compass, truth is the destination. Why it still matters: we live in a time of split thinking. Either you're rational or you're spiritual, either science or faith, either intellect or emotion. But Sadra says no, truth is not divided. To reach the real, you must bring all of yourself. The major works of Mulla Sadra. Books not just to read, but to journey through. Mulla Sadra didn't write books to impress. He wrote them to awaken. Each work he produced wasn't just a philosophical manual, it was a spiritual itinerary, designed to guide the reader from concept to contemplation, from mind to soul. Let's explore some of his most important writings, the ones that still shape Islamic philosophy, mysticism, and theology today. His magnum opus, his masterpiece, his legacy. This is not your average book of philosophy. It's a multi-volume map of reality, structured around four metaphysical journeys. Journey from the creation to the creator, from multiplicity toward unity. Journey in the creator with the creator, a deep contemplation of divine essence. Journey from the creator back to creation, returning to guide others, now transformed. Journey among creation with the light of the creator, living in the world but with inner vision. Topics covered include the primacy of existence, gradation of being, substantial motion, the soul's nature and its immortality, resurrection and the afterlife, prophethood and divine wisdom. Sadra fuses reason, mysticism, and scripture, not as separate subjects, but as one integrated path. The Four Journeys isn't just a book, it's an invitation to walk. Divine testimonies in the paths of the seekers. This text blends metaphysics and mysticism into one stream of insight. Topics include God's attributes, the hierarchy of existence, the spiritual journey of the soul, and the role of the intellect in mystical ascent. Sadra uses logic, but always in service of spiritual realization. The book is both a theological treatise and a guide for the heart. Mafati al-Ghaib, or the Keys to the Unseen, delves into the inner layers of the Quran. Here, Sadra takes selected Quranic verses and interprets them philosophically and mystically. He doesn't stop at the surface meaning. He dives into the spiritual logic behind the words, showing how revelation and reason mirror each other. This book reflects his deep belief that truth isn't just in what's said, it's in what's meant. Al-Mashair, also known as the Book of Metaphysical Perceptions, serves as a compact and powerful summary of Mulla Sadra's core ideas. In this work, Sadra returns to the basics of philosophy, but does so with remarkable clarity and elegance. The main themes include the reality of being, the illusion of quiddity or essence, and how multiplicity arises from unity. It also explores the ontological structure of the world in a profound and accessible manner. This work is like a pocket version of his grand philosophy, ideal for those beginning their journey into Mulla Sadra's thought. Though incomplete, Sadra's commentary on parts of the Quran, especially Surah al-Baqarah, shows his method in action. Philosophy as a lens, mysticism as a guide, scripture as a living source of metaphysical truth. He interprets verses not just grammatically but ontologically, revealing how divine words point toward existential realities. In this work, Sadra analyzes foundational hadiths with philosophical depth. He explores the nature of the soul, the stages of being, divine knowledge and providence. This book proves that philosophy and theology can enrich each other rather than contradict. Other works, treatises on resurrection, time, and the soul, short texts on eternity versus temporality, knowledge, and the unity of existence. Commentaries that blend Avicennian logic with mystical insight. Many of his writings were so ahead of their time that they're still being studied, edited, and even discovered today. Mulla Sadra didn't write for entertainment, or even just for argument. He wrote for those who seek, who want to see more deeply, live more truthfully, become more fully. And with every word, he whispers to the reader, don't just think this, become this. Mulla Sadra didn't just leave behind ideas, he left behind a living current of thought, one that still flows through seminaries, universities, spiritual circles, and modern philosophical debates. Let's trace how his intellectual legacy expanded, both in the Islamic world and beyond. When Sadra returned to Shiraz, he began training students who would carry his philosophy forward. Among them, Fayaz Lahiji, a theologian and philosopher who helped articulate and preserve Sadra's complex system, and Abdul Razak Lahiji, Fayaz's son, a major contributor to Sadra's metaphysical development. They ensured that Sadra's teachings didn't vanish with his death. Instead, they became a tradition. During the Qajar dynasty, Sadra's philosophy saw a resurgence. The Sadra school became prominent again, especially in the capital, Tehran. Important figures included Mullah Hadi Sabzawari, author of the famous Manzuma, a poetic summary of Sadrian thought, Aka Ali Modarez Zanouzi, a meticulous logician and metaphysician, and Mirza Abu al-Hasan Jalwa, another strong transmitter of Sadrian themes. In recent decades, Sadra's thought has become foundational in the Shia religious seminaries, particularly in Qom. Key contemporary thinkers and Sadrian scholars include Allama Tabatabai, whose Nihayat al-Hikmah and Tafsir al-Mizan carried Sadrian themes into modern Quranic interpretation. Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, who taught Sadrian logic and metaphysics to generations, and Ayatollah Jawadi Amoli, one of the leading living interpreters of Mulla Sadra today. Sadra is no longer a controversial figure in seminaries, he is now a central pillar. Although Sadra's writings weren't immediately translated into Western languages, interest began to grow in the 20th century, particularly through the work of Henry Corbin, the French philosopher and Orientalist, who introduced Sadra to Western audiences and compared him to Heidegger. Corbin described Sadra's ontology as an existential theology, likening it to Christian mysticism and existential phenomenology. Today, Sadra is studied in comparative religious studies, Islamic thought departments, and even courses in metaphysics and epistemology in Western academia. Sadra's major works have been translated into English, French, Arabic, Urdu, and Turkish. Conferences dedicated to Sadrian thought have been held in Lebanon, Egypt, India, Pakistan, UK, and the USA. Sadra's philosophy didn't just stay in the classroom. It redefined the concept of death, not as a loss, but a transition in being, transformed theology, arguing that God is not a thing out there, but the ground of all existence, reimagined ethics, not as reward-punishment, but as the elevation of being. Mulla Sadra wasn't a library philosopher, he was an architect of worldview, and that worldview is still relevant in a world torn between blind rationalism and shallow spirituality. He offers a third path, depth with clarity, heart with precision. Criticisms and controversies, when bold thought disturbs comfortable belief. Mulla Sadra's philosophy is profound, but it didn't land softly. His ideas challenged entrenched dogmas, rewrote theological assumptions, and merged traditions that many had spent lifetimes keeping apart. Naturally, not everyone was thrilled. Let's explore the main criticisms, both in his time and after. Many jurists and theologians in Sadra's time were suspicious, if not outright hostile, toward philosophy and mysticism. And Sadra brought both into full force. He reinterprets scripture philosophically. Isn't that distorting revelation? He claims the soul becomes what it knows. Isn't that mystic exaggeration? He speaks of substantial motion and degrees of being. Where are these in the Hadith? Some even accused him of heresy, calling his work a deviation from Islamic orthodoxy. This pressure led to his retreat to Kahak, an exile that was as much spiritual as it was intellectual. One of the most common and misunderstood criticisms was that Sadra's philosophy implied pantheism, that everything is God. This stems from his embrace of Wadat al-Wujud, unity of being, influenced by Ibn Arabi. But Sadra was careful. He never said the created world is God. He said, God is the source and sustainer of all existence, and everything else is dependent on him, not equal to him. His position, creation is real, but only through the real. Not pantheism, ontological dependence. Even among philosophers, some pushed back. Substantial motion was seen by some as unverifiable, more poetic than demonstrable. Primacy of existence was criticized for being too abstract or unnecessary. Some argued that Sadra blurred the line between mysticism and logic, weakening both. In short, they worried his synthesis was too ambitious, trying to do too much too fast across too many disciplines. Until the 20th century, many madrasas and Islamic institutions avoided or censored Sadra's works. His books were taught in select elite circles, but rarely in the mainstream. It wasn't until scholars like Allama Tabatabai and Henry Corbin revived his legacy that his works found a new global audience. Today, some Western thinkers critique Sadra for being too metaphysical in a world that wants data, too mystical in a time that favors logic, too religious in a climate of secularism. But perhaps that's the point. Sadra didn't fit into easy categories. He stood between worlds, and that's why he still matters. In a way, the resistance to Sadra reveals just how disruptive his ideas were. He wasn't trying to comfort people, he was trying to wake them up. And like all revolutionary thinkers, Socrates, Spinoza, Nietzsche, he paid a price for that. Why Mulla Sadra still matters today, a voice for our time from 4 centuries ago. We live in an age of strange contrasts. On one hand, we have endless data, but little wisdom. We can calculate anything, but struggle to contemplate meaning. We build artificial intelligence, but neglect the natural soul. And in this landscape, a 17th century Persian philosopher steps forward, not with rigid doctrines or cold logic, but with a living question. What is it to exist, and how can you grow into your existence? That is why Mulla Sadra still matters. Sadra taught that reason without soul is dry, and spirituality without clarity is dangerous. He refused to separate the intellect from the inner self. You are not a finished product. You are not defined by your past. Your very substance is in motion. Modern life pushes us towards surface-level thinking. Appearance, labels, metrics. Sadra turned knowledge into something sacred. It's not just learning about something, it's becoming one with it. In Sadra's view, death is a passage, not a disappearance. The soul continues its journey, shaped by how it lived, loved, learned, and longed. He bridges east and west, science and soul, logic and longing. In a world breaking apart into extremes, his vision pulls things back together. Here at FactUp, we don't just tell stories of the past, we explore minds that can still shape the future.